Should UKIP embrace Northern England Labour leave areas as it increasingly becomes the only party to speak to the working masses?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Labour voters are being betrayed by Labour. There's no question about it. It's become a party purely for sort of urban middle class, virtue signalers to pretend that they care anything about working class people in this country, and they don't. So UKIP is the party for you. We're concerned about the fact that the working class people in this country have been ignored for decades and decades. The people who really have power in this country, they don't care who your neighbours are. They don't care if you live with gang crime. They don't care if there's drug dealers and you've got low wages and there aren't enough jobs or anything like that. What they want is to keep wages low, maintain very high levels of immigration in order to do that, and they simply don't seem to be able to carry out or implement any policy that actually makes the lives of people on lower wages and people who live in some of the less well-off parts of this country better. So UKIP will do that. We will control immigration. We will get it under control, and you'll see wages rising, and you'll see a better life as a result. So vote UKIP.
Can I say something on that? Very quickly.
Sorry, go on.
Well, when I was the leader of UKIP for about 15, 16 months, I was in fact the only genuine working class leader of a UK political party. I never went to Eton. Unlike my colleague.
I'm unable to represent the working class people like Gerald.
Well, you don't have to be part of something to represent it. But I did actually go up and hold lots of meetings, quite a few meetings up in the north of England. It's the ordinary working class people who have been betrayed by Labour during my lifetime. They don't represent them anymore. As Richard said, they represent the guilt-ridden middle-class Remainer tosspots and immigrants. And they have imported voters, basically, by the 100,000 and by the million, year after year, because they're far more likely to vote Labour.
Let me make a point about this. You said they represent immigrants. They don't represent immigrants in Britain. They represent the interests and opportunities for non-British people who would like to be immigrants to Britain, because it's actually British immigrants very often who are at the lowest rung of the ladder and who suffer most from excessive immigration.
You know, there was something I found really interesting. There's a left-wing comedy news site called News Thump, and on the right wing you've got the Babylon Bees, these two parody sites that are effectively sort of mirror images of one another. But they put up a post the other day that I found fascinating. It was Priti Patel gets neck damage from pulling up the ladder too fast. And I was suddenly going, oh my God, there is so much packed into that. I mean, it's quite funny on the face of it. But it shows you exactly what the problem is. It's not, the joke is not that foreign countries are terrible and that they want to come here and, you know, they shouldn't be able to or anything like that. The joke is that Priti Patel is, that's assumed. It's assumed in the joke that the foreign countries are terrible and that Priti Patel actually managed to injure herself pulling up the ladder. As in, they view this as a way of bringing the third world out of poverty, mass immigration. Yeah. And that's totally unfeasible.
Which is impossible. There are 3.5 billion people in the world who earn less than £2 a day. So we can't hope even to make a dent into 1% of the people in the third world that the virtue signalers like to pretend that they're helping.
But your middle-class virtue signalling tosspots actually do, because a lot of them actually don't believe we should have any borders whatsoever. Absolutely. So when they go out, presumably they wear blinkers because they can't see the fact that everywhere is overcrowded, everywhere is being built on, and I presume that what they actually like is for the entire country to be concreted over with tower blocks, and you just walk in narrow streets between the tower blocks.
I have heard that.
And they've all got booper.
When that happens, then they'll probably admit that the time has come to end it, of course, but then they'll have
But they've all got booper because they've never had to get on the phone at 8:29 and 30 seconds in the morning and press the button at exactly 8:29 and 28 seconds so that it rings at 8:30 to the second, because that's what my local practice was like. If you ever wanted a hope in the last few years, if you wanted a hope of a medical appointment at my GP surgery, you had to run your whole life around that 1 second of the day where you could have a hope of getting in and getting an appointment. So they all must have booper as well, because they seem to think that we can have an unlimited number of people coming in and none of this gives.
I've got no doubt that Daddy is paying for booper for them as well. But one of the things I find is that they have a completely inverse narratives surrounding immigration into the country as well. Like the NHS, for example, they're constantly complaining that the NHS is understaffed and underfunded. And they're constantly complaining about wait times, and these are the consequence of austerity. But if you look at NHS funding, it's just going up in line with like above inflation every year. The Tories are pledging 20 more billion extra, and so it's gone from something like 112 billion to 130 billion now.
That's 160.
I tell you what I find so depressing about politics
but the
now.
The thing is, they can't square the circle. That they say, well, we need immigrants to prop up the NHS. So, well, yeah, but they're serving other immigrants because the numbers are too great and we can't afford.
But this is
it's a Ponzi scheme.
This is what's so depressing about politics now is it's almost impossible now to have a rational discussion about something because you are then identified as something and you're called a name.
Okay.
And I mean, I call Remainer's name. It's true, but I do try to have the rational argument first. Yeah. And this is now, and it doesn't just exist amongst your opponents, it's in the media. Mm-hmm. It's now impossible for a politician to go on the TV or the radio and say what they think because they'll be destroyed. This is what happened to me during the European elections. I was attacked relentlessly, and now no politician is going to go on and talk about the things I tried to talk about because they think, hang on, look at what happened to him. He got wiped out, and this is what's going to happen to me if I do it. And I think this is so... I don't know, depressing is the wrong word. It's signaling the end of democracy because people won't be able to have discussions about something without being blackballed and tarred and identified as something abominable just because they try to have a point of view. Nobody in the political sphere is going to stand up and say, maybe we need to have another look about how the NHS is funded, how it works, and you'll get slaughtered by all these people. What they overlook is the fact, if you go on the continent, there's no NHS. Look at the great things we get from the EU. Okay, you come over here, you get free use of the NHS. You go over there, in most countries, there is no equivalent of the NHS. You have to pay. If you go to Brussels, for example, if you're in Belgium, you have to pay to use the health service. In places like Spain, Greece, Eastern Europe, they don't have equivalent of health service, and you certainly have to pay in order to use it. So they're making an equivalence between things that don't exist. But you can't have that discussion with them and say, you can't have free access to our health service when we're not getting free access to health services that don't exist there. How can you give council housing to people who come from Eastern Europe? Go to Romania and Bulgaria and turn up and say, I'd like to go on your housing list, please, and I've got 5 kids and I expect to go to the top. You'll be laughed out. They don't have council housing anyway in most of those places. So this is what's wrong with the mentality of these people, is that you can't actually have a rational discussion with them about something. And if you open borders to places where there are lots of things available that people can have, well, surprise, surprise, lots of people will turn up and take advantage of it. On the plus side, I understand you can get yourself a very nice house in Bulgaria with a swimming pool, probably for less than about 30,000 quid.
You can.
So if you've got a bit of cash, go in the other direction, I suppose.
Yeah.